2 months after the divorce, the silence in my apartment still felt loud. There were no more slammed doors. No more quiet arguments whispered late at night, so the neighbors wouldn't hear. No more pretending we weren't already breaking long before the papers were signed. Just me and Omega, whose world had fallen apart so quietly it barely made a sound. My name is Alex Hayes, and 2 months after walking out of my alpha husband's life, I found out I was pregnant with his child. It started with exhaustion, the kind that sank into my bones. I blamed stress. New job, new apartment, new life. I ignored the dizziness, the nausea, the way the smell of coffee suddenly made me gag when I used to live on it. I ignored the ache in my chest whenever I remembered his voice. Raymond Blackwell, the alpha who once swore I was his forever, right up until the day he said forever was too heavy to carry. I stared at the pregnancy test in the bathroom, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped it. The digital screen blinked once, then twice. Then the word appeared. Pregnant. For a moment my brain refused to understand. My mind went blank. My heart didn't. No, I whispered to the empty room. No, this is wrong. But the second test said the same thing. And the third. My knees buckled, and I slid to the floor, the cold tiles biting into my skin. Tears blurred everything. My breathing turned shallow, shaky, desperate. I pressed a hand over my stomach, terrified and overwhelmed at the same time. Raymond didn't love me anymore. And now, he would be tied to me forever. Worse, he was getting remarried. His engagement announcement was everywhere online. A picture-perfect alpha couple in expensive clothes, smiling in front of a gold arch. His fiancée, Serena, looking like she stepped out of a magazine, her hand resting on his chest like she belonged there. I closed the article immediately. It still hurt, even after everything. People think divorce happens because two people stop loving each other. Sometimes it happens because love isn't enough. Raymond and I met young. Too young. He was ambitious, fiercely driven, heir to a powerful alpha family. I was softer, quieter. We loved each other, deeply, but his world demanded perfection. His parents hated that I was an Omega. They never said it directly, but their smiles tightened whenever I entered the room. Over time, those smiles turned into pressure. Expectations. Arguments about things we never had to argue about before. I still remember the night it ended. No shouting. No dramatic betrayal. Just exhaustion. I think we're hurting each other, Raymond said quietly. I don't want it anymore. And somehow, I understood. We signed the papers a week later. I told myself it was freedom. So why did it feel like being hollowed out from the inside? Now here I was, holding the one secret that could shatter everything. A baby. His baby. Our baby. My first instinct was to run. Disappear. Start over somewhere new where no one knew me or my mistakes. Somewhere I wouldn't feel judged or pitted. Somewhere I didn't have to face him. But every time I tried to imagine leaving, I pictured a tiny heartbeat echoing alone. I couldn't do that. So I made an appointment with the doctor. The clinic smelled sterile and safe, like nothing bad could possibly exist there. The doctor, a gentle beta woman with soft eyes, confirmed what I already knew but still wasn't ready to accept. 10 weeks. Strong heartbeat. I cried listening to it. Not sad tears. Not happy tears. Just overwhelmed ones. Do you have support? She asked kindly. I forced a smile. Yes. It was a lie. When I stepped outside, the wind hit my face, cool and grounding. And then fate, or the universe, or plain cruelty, decided that was the perfect moment for me to run straight into the last person I wanted to see. Raymond. He was standing by the pharmacy counter, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking tired but still painfully beautiful. For a second, neither of us moved. Then his eyes softened. Alex. I froze. My heart tried to escape my chest. I opened my mouth to speak, say anything, but a familiar figure walked up and slipped her hand into his. Serena. Of course. Alex, right? She said politely, like we were strangers. I swallowed. Yes. Raymond studied me carefully. His gaze dropped, just briefly, to the prescription bag in my hand. I prayed he couldn't hear the pounding of my heart. We should catch up sometime, he said gently. There's a lot I wish we'd said before. I nodded because words had abandoned me. We said goodbye. I held myself together until I got home. Then I broke. I cried because I still loved him. I cried because he didn't belong to me anymore. I cried because I was carrying a piece of him inside me, and he didn't know. For hours I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one hand over my stomach. What was I supposed to do? Tell him and risk ruining his life? Or stay silent and let our child grow up never knowing their father? But the twist didn't hit me until the next morning. Because when I checked my messages, there was one from him. We need to talk. It's important. And that's when I realized something terrifying. Raymond already knew something was wrong. And fate wasn't finished with us yet. Raymond's message sat on my phone like a ticking bomb. We need to talk. It's important. My first instinct was panic. Had someone seen me at the clinic? Had word spread? Was the universe laughing at how badly I wanted to keep my life quiet? I didn't reply right away. I paced the apartment until the sun dipped below the skyline and shadows swallowed the walls. My stomach twisted, not from the pregnancy this time, but from fear. Finally, before I could lose my nerve, I typed back. Okay. When? His answer came instantly. Tonight. If you're free. Same coffee shop as before. The before hit harder than it should have. Before the divorce. Before we became different people. Before we forgot how to talk without hurting each other. The coffee shop hadn't changed. Same soft lighting. Same chairs that creaked when you sat. Same sugary smell of cinnamon and espresso. It was a place built for conversations that mattered, good or bad. He was already there when I arrived, leaning back slightly, fingers wrapped around a cup he'd forgotten to drink. His eyes lifted the second the bell above the door rang. For a heartbeat, we just looked at each other. Hey, he said softly. Hey. I sat down. My hands shook, so I kept them hidden under the table. He studied me for a moment, like he was trying to read a language he used to be fluent in. You look tired, he murmured. I forced a smile. Long days. Silence stretched between us, not hostile, not cold. Just full of everything we hadn't said. Finally, he took a breath. I owe you an apology. My throat tightened. That was not what I expected. For what? For how things ended, he said quietly. I thought by letting go, we'd both heal faster. But I didn't realize how much I'd already hurt you before that. The pressure, the expectations, my family. His voice trailed off like the words were too heavy to carry. I swallowed hard. We were both drowning. We just didn't admit it. He nodded. Then he said the last thing I wanted to hear. I'm getting married next month. Like a knife twisting in a wound I pretended didn't exist. I know, I said, keeping my tone as steady as I could. Congratulations. He searched my face, probably looking for bitterness. Anger. Something. Instead, he found resignation. Thank you, he said quietly. He hesitated, then continued. I wanted to talk because, even though we're not together anymore, you were the most important part of my life for years. And I don't want us to be strangers. I want us to be okay. Okay. I wished I knew what that word meant anymore. I want that too, I whispered. And I meant it. Because love doesn't always vanish. Sometimes it shifts shape, from fire to gentle ache. From forever to memory. We talked for nearly an hour. About work. About the weather. About nothing important and everything unspoken. But the whole time, guilt gnawed at me. I was keeping a secret that didn't belong only to me. When we finally stepped outside, the evening air was cool. The sky bruised purple with the last light of day. He shoved his hands in his pockets like he used to do when he was nervous. Alex, he said softly. Are you happy? The question sliced through me. I'm figuring it out. He nodded like he understood. Then his expression softened in a way that felt too familiar. Let me know if you ever need anything. Even now, even after everything. I'll show up. And that almost broke me. Because for one suspended second, I wanted to tell him everything. I wanted to say there's a heartbeat inside me, and it's half yours. But fear won. Fear of ruining his new life. Fear of being seen as the mistake he left behind. Fear of being judged, again, for being an omega who wasn't strong enough to keep his alpha. So I said nothing. He walked away, and my heart walked with him. That night, sleep refused to come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each kick of my anxiety. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent and accusing. I wasn't just responsible for myself anymore. There was a tiny life depending on me to make the right choices. And I didn't even know what those were. By morning, I'd made a decision. I couldn't keep this secret forever. Raymond deserved to know, not because he was an alpha or because of duty, but because every child deserves the truth. But before I could figure out how to tell him, life intervened. Literally. I ran into Serena at the grocery store. She was poised, elegant, every inch the perfect alpha bride. She smiled warmly when she saw me, which somehow hurt more than if she'd glared. Alex. Hi. I blinked. Serena. Hey. She hesitated before speaking again. I'm glad I ran into you. I just wanted to say, I know it must have been hard. The divorce. Everything. But I want you to know I'm not here to erase your place in Raymond's life. Her sincerity stunned me. Most people expected me to hate her. But I didn't. She hadn't broken us. We were already broken. Thank you, I said honestly. Really? She smiled gently, then paused, studying me in that subtle alpha way. Are you feeling all right? You look a little pale. I laughed nervously. Just tired. Take care of yourself, she said softly. Please. And then, before walking away, she added, Raymond still worries about you, you know. Her words lingered long after she disappeared down the aisle. By the time I reached home, my hands trembled again. This was no longer just a decision. It was a responsibility. So I sat at my kitchen table, heart racing, tears burning behind my eyes. And I finally began typing the message that would change everything. Raymond, there's something I need to tell you. I hovered over the send button, trembled, prayed, and pressed it. Seconds later, 3 dots appeared. He was typing back. My life, our lives, were about to split into before and after forever. And I had no idea what kind of alpha he would choose to be when the truth finally shattered his world. I stared at the glowing screen, watching the typing dots appear, disappear, appear again. Then his reply came. Are you okay? Where are you? Not suspicion. Not anger. Just concern. Which somehow made my chest ache even more. I swallowed hard and typed back. I'm home. I just need to talk. In person. Please. There was a pause. Then. I'll be there in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. In 20 minutes, my life would divide into before the truth and after it. I walked around my tiny apartment in a daze, straightening pillows, wiping a clean countertop for the 5th time. Anything to keep my hands from shaking. My reflection in the hallway mirror looked like a stranger. Pale, wide-eyed, terrified. When the knock finally came, my breath caught. I opened the door. Raymond stood there, hair slightly windswept, worry etched across his face. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He just searched my eyes like the answer was hidden behind them. Alex, he said softly. What's wrong? I stepped aside, letting him in. He moved carefully, gently, almost reverently, like he was afraid one wrong move would make me shatter. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. Too close. Too far. There was no easy way to say it. I'm pregnant, I whispered. The words fell between us like broken glass. For a heartbeat, nothing existed but silence. His lips parted, but no sound came out. His brows furrowed, then relaxed, then furrowed again as the information rearranged itself inside his mind. He swallowed. You're pregnant. I nodded. His gaze drifted, almost unconsciously, toward my stomach. Not in shock. Not in horror. More like awe. How far along? 8 weeks, I said, voice trembling. And it's yours. Another silence, heavier this time. Not angry. Not cold. Just stunned. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was steadying himself. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want to ruin your new life. Because I didn't want to seem like I was dragging you back. Because I was scared of hearing you tell me I should get rid of it. But I said none of that. I didn't know how, I admitted. And I didn't want you to feel trapped. You deserve to be happy. He stared at me for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. Alex, this is my child too. Something broke inside me then. Weeks of fear and guilt and loneliness cracked open and spilled out in the form of tears I couldn't hold back anymore. I know, I whispered. I just didn't want to be the reason your life gets complicated again. He moved closer, instinctively, without thinking, and placed a cautious hand on my shoulder. The touch was gentle, familiar, painful. My life is already complicated, he said softly. But I don't regret this. Not for a second. His words weren't an answer, but they weren't rejection either. They were a bridge across the distance we'd built. We talked for hours. About doctors. About responsibilities. About fears neither of us had ever said out loud before. But we also talked about the past. About how our marriage had slowly cracked under pressure. Not because we stopped caring, but because the world expected us to be stronger than we were. And the more we talked, the more something unexpected slipped quietly into the room. Not romance. Not longing. Something simpler. Understanding. By the time he left, the night had deepened into silence. He paused at the door, turning back to me. "I'm not going to disappear," he said gently. "I'll be here. For both of you. Both of you." The words wrapped around my heart like a blanket I didn't know I needed. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of doctor visits, exhaustion, and late-night cravings that made me question all of my life choices. True to his word, Raymond showed up. Sometimes with groceries. Sometimes with prenatal vitamins. Sometimes just to sit on the sofa and listen. We didn't magically fall back into old patterns. But we stopped feeling like strangers. Which is probably why the media storm hit harder than expected. It started with a blurry photo. Someone spotted us leaving the clinic together, Raymond walking beside me, one hand hovering protectively at my back. The headline went viral in hours. Business tycoon seen accompanying ex-spouse to Omega Clinic. Scandal or support? Then came the interviews. The gossip shows. The whispers. And the pressure. Especially on Serena. I'd expected anger. Instead, she called me. "Alex." Her voice was calm, too calm. "Can we meet?" We sat across from each other at a quiet cafe. Just the two of us. She didn't waste time. "Is it true?" she asked softly. I nodded. She closed her eyes briefly, more in grief than fury. "I always knew Raymond still cared about you," she murmured. "But I didn't realize how much." Her words stunned me. "I didn't plan for this," I said quickly. "I'm not trying to ruin your future." She looked at me then, really looked. And instead of rivalry, I saw sympathy. "You're the mother of his child," she said quietly. "That will always matter. And if I'm being honest, I think part of him never stopped loving you. Just not in the same way anymore." Her honesty hit harder than anger ever could. She sighed, tired, older than her years. "My family expects this marriage. But Raymond shouldn't be with me out of obligation. Not when his heart is already tied somewhere else." I didn't know what to say. Not when it felt like the world was tilting beneath my feet. That night, Raymond showed up at my door again. But this time, he looked different. Lighter. Sadder. Resolved. "I called off the wedding," he said quietly. My breath hitched. "Raymond, I couldn't marry someone," he continued gently, "while the most important people in my life were standing on the outside looking in. Most important people. Plural. Me. And the tiny heartbeat inside me. I don't want to go back," he said. "Not to what we were. We broke each other once already. But I do want to move forward. Together. As partners. As parents. As family. Not a love confession. Not a proposal. Something more real. A promise." I didn't answer right away. The weight of it deserved silence. Consideration. Then finally I nodded. "Okay." And for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. But as our new beginning settled quietly into place, none of us realized yet that someone else was watching. Someone who didn't want happily ever afters. Someone who wasn't ready to let go. And their presence in the shadows was about to change everything. If I'd known peace was only the quiet breath before a storm, maybe I wouldn't have let myself relax. Maybe I wouldn't have started to believe that life was finally stitching itself back together. But even the calmest waters can hide rip currents. And ours had a name. Serena's father. He wasn't just an influential minister. He was the kind of man who didn't like unfinished narratives. And to him, Raymond breaking off the engagement wasn't a decision. It was an insult. The first sign of trouble came in whispers. Clients suddenly reconsidering contracts. Articles painting Raymond as unstable, irresponsible, weakened by sentimental distractions. And one headline cut deeper than the rest. Omega ex-spouse exploits former husband, claims pregnancy for financial gain. I stared at the screen, numb. The comments were worse. He probably trapped him. Omegas always play the victim. Gold digger. Attention seeker. It didn't matter that the pregnancy was real. It didn't matter that I had never asked Raymond for a cent. People believed what they wanted. My phone buzzed again, this time with a private number. I shouldn't have answered. But I did. "You don't know what you've done," a cold voice said. "Walk away. Take the money I'll send you. Leave the city, and never contact Raymond again." Otherwise, your life will become difficult. I didn't need a name. I already knew who it was. I'm not for sale, I said quietly and hung up, even though my hands were shaking hard enough to rattle the phone. I didn't tell Raymond. Not then, because he was already drowning under stress, fighting for his company, fighting public pressure, fighting accusations of emotional instability. And still, he showed up for every doctor appointment, every late-night panic spiral, every quiet moment when the future felt too big for me to hold alone. So I held the fear instead, until it exploded. It happened on a rainy evening, the kind where the world blurs into streaks of silver outside your window. I was sorting baby clothes that a kind neighbor had dropped off when there was a loud, sharp knock at my door. Too loud, too sharp. I opened it, and two men in dark suits stepped inside without asking. "Mr. Raymond Cross is being investigated for corporate fraud," one of them said flatly. "We advise you to answer our questions." Fraud. My heart plummeted. There must be a mistake. But they were already inside, already scanning the apartment, already acting like I was guilty just for being here. I answered everything I could, which wasn't much. And when they finally left, the silence they left behind was louder than the storm outside. Within an hour, the news dropped. CEO Raymond Cross under investigation. Assets frozen pending review. Which meant his accounts, his access, his stability. Everything vanished in an instant. And I knew, without needing to be told, this wasn't a coincidence. This was retaliation. This was punishment for daring to exist in a world that wanted me erased. My phone rang again. This time it was Raymond. His voice shook, but not with fear. With fury. "They think they can control me," he said. "They think they can use you to bend me. I won't let them." For a moment, I forgot to breathe. "Raymond, what are we going to do?" There was a pause, a soft exhale on the other end of the line. "We're going to protect our child," he said simply. "And we're going to protect you. Whatever it takes." That night, he showed up at my apartment with nothing but an overnight bag and a quiet determination that wrapped around me like armor. "You're staying with me from now on," he said. "No arguments." And for once, I didn't argue, because I was tired of being brave alone. Raymond's condo was high above the city, glass walls and quiet luxury. But beneath the surface, tension hummed like a live wire. Lawyers called. Journalists swarmed. Social media speculated like vultures circling a still-breathing body. And in the middle of it all, we found ourselves existing together again. Not as spouses, but as two people standing back to back in a war zone. He'd fall asleep still in his work clothes, exhaustion lining his face. I'd wake in the night to find him sitting beside the bed, forehead resting against my stomach, whispering apologies to a child who couldn't yet hear them. "I'm sorry," he'd murmur. "I should have protected you both better." And I'd stroke his hair and whisper back, "You're here. That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Not for the world. Not for the people determined to tear us down. And eventually, they came for the one place I thought was safe. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind where the baby kicked softly and the sunlight slanted across the floor like spilled gold. Raymond had stepped out for a meeting with his lawyer. The doorbell rang. I checked the peephole. Serena. I hesitated, then opened the door. She looked different, worn, strained, but calm. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. We sat across from each other at the kitchen island. The same uncomfortable symmetry as our cafe meeting, except this time the air was thicker. Heavier. "I need to tell you something," she said. And then she told me everything. Her father. The pressure. The manipulation. The coordinated attack meant to break Raymond until he crawled back in humiliation. "I tried to stop it," she said, voice cracking. "But I don't control him. And now it's gone too far." My stomach twisted. "You have to tell Raymond," I whispered. She shook her head. "He'll confront him. And my father, he doesn't lose. When powerful men feel threatened, they destroy." I felt the baby kick, a sharp flutter that reminded me why this mattered. "I'm not leaving," I said quietly. "And neither is he." She closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I was afraid you'd say that." That night, when Raymond returned, there was a weight in the air I couldn't hide anymore. So I told him everything. Not just about Serena's father, but about the money offer, the threats, the accusations, the fear I had been carrying alone. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he pulled me gently into his arms, holding me like he was memorizing the shape of me. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You should never have had to face that alone." And in that embrace, something shifted. Not romance, not longing, something stronger. Trust. "We're not running," he said firmly. "But we're also not fighting alone." Which is when he revealed the part one hadn't known. He had been investigating them too. The fake fraud report, the planted stories, the political pressure, everything. And he now had proof. Evidence that could destroy powerful reputations. Evidence that could clear his name. Evidence that could end this. But it came with a price. "Once we release this," he said softly, "there's no going back. They'll retaliate in ways we can't predict. You and the baby may become targets." Fear wrapped icy fingers around my heart. But then the baby kicked again, a small, defiant thump. And I realized, this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about the world my child would be born into. I took his hand. "We do it," I said. "Together." He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in a long time, pride flickered in his eyes. Not ownership. Not possession. Respect. "Together," he echoed. We didn't know it yet. But that decision was the match that would finally set everything ablaze. Because in the shadows, far from the light of our small, fragile peace, a move had already been made, and the consequences waiting for us would change everything. If I'd known the truth would cost us everything, I don't think I would have changed my mind. Because some truths aren't weapons. They're anchors. And ours was about to drag everything to the surface. Raymond released the evidence at dawn. Emails, financial trails, political pressure strings tied so tight they strangled the light out of every room they touched. He didn't do it through a press conference or a dramatic speech. He did it quietly, cleanly, like removing a toxin from the bloodstream. By midday, the world had changed. News outlets scrambled. Comment sections flipped. Investigations opened. And suddenly the narrative shifted. CEO framed, political influence exposed. But powerful men don't go down quietly. Serena's father didn't rage. He planned. That was the worst part. The calm. The silence. Like the ocean drawing back before a wave destroys the shore. The threats started again. Only this time they weren't subtle. A car following us. A drone hovering outside the condo window. A note slipped under the door. "You were warned." Fear became a living thing in my chest, curling beneath my ribs, heavy and cold. I started double-locking doors. Triple-checking windows. Flinching whenever someone knocked. Raymond noticed everything. He always did. One night, when the city lights shimmered like distant stars, he found me sitting in the nursery, the soft pastel room half-finished, holding a tiny pair of socks like they were a life raft. "Alex," he said gently, "talk to me." I shook my head. "If something happens to you." He didn't let me finish. "Nothing is going to happen to me." But the way he pulled me into his arms, the way his hands trembled, betrayed the truth. He was just as scared. And still, he refused to bend. "We fight clean," he said. "We win clean." That was the line he wouldn't cross, even if the others already had. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was leaving the doctor's office alone. Raymond had been delayed in court, forced to testify, forced to relive every humiliation crafted to break him. The parking lot was quiet. Too quiet. I was unlocking the car door when a hand grabbed my arm. A rough voice muttered in my ear. "You should have taken the money." The world tilted. My pulse roared. He dragged me toward a dark van, movements efficient, cold. For a terrifying second, I thought this was it. That my story, our story, would end here, in a lonely parking lot, swallowed by silence. But the universe wasn't done with us. Because as the van door slid open, a second voice cut through the air like a blade. "Let him go." Raymond. I'd never heard his voice like that. Low, controlled, deadly calm. The kind of voice that didn't repeat itself. 2 men turned. One tightened his grip. Pain shot through my arm, sharp and bright. "Stay back," he warned. Raymond didn't move closer. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He just looked at them, really looked, and the weight of his fury filled the space like a living thing. "You touch him again," he said softly, "and you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you hadn't." There was something in his tone that made even the wind hold its breath. Silence stretched. Then, like cowards always do, they released me and ran. Raymond caught me before my knees could buckle. "It's okay," he whispered, voice breaking. You're safe. I've got you. I've got you. But safety is fragile. And fear has a long echo. The stress triggered contractions. Too early. Too fast. The next hours blurred into flashing lights and hospital hallways and the sharp, sterile smell of emergency. I remember crying because the world tilted too quickly. I remember Raymond's hand, warm and constant in mine. I remember doctors speaking in calm voices meant to hide panic. And I remember one clear moment, his forehead against mine. I'm here. You don't do this alone. Not ever again. Our son was born under dim lights and whispered prayers. Tiny, fragile, perfect. He let out a small cry, thin but determined, and the world finally exhaled. Raymond wept silently. Not loud sobs. Just quiet tears slipping down his cheeks like he didn't deserve the sound grief made. Because this wasn't grief. It was relief. And love he couldn't hide anymore. The fallout happened fast after that. Arrests. Resignations. A public apology that didn't erase the damage, but proved one thing. We weren't liars. We weren't manipulators. We were just two people trying to build a life in a world that would rather see us break. Serena visited once. She held the baby gently, like he was made of sunlight, and smiled sadly. He looks like you, she told Raymond. Then she squeezed my hand. Take care of each other. And she left, quietly, like she'd never been the villain in anyone's story. Because she wasn't. She was just another person caught in the web of powerful men and fragile expectations. Just like us. Weeks passed. The house filled with soft noises, sleepy baby sighs, kettle whistles, late-night whispers shared in the quiet dark. Raymond moved slower now. Softer. Like he'd finally learned the speed of gentleness. One night, while our son slept between us in a crib small enough to look like a dream, he spoke. I don't want to rewrite the past, he said. We hurt each other there. We weren't ready then. He paused. But I want to write the future. With you. If you'll let me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. It was real. Grounded. Honest. I thought about the storm. The fear. The loneliness. The love that never really vanished. It just changed shape until we learned how to hold it again. And I answered the only way that felt true. We don't go back, I said softly. We go forward. Together. His fingers twined with mine. Not claiming. Connecting. And for the first time since the divorce papers were signed, I didn't feel like we were pretending to be okay. We were learning how to be okay. They say storms reveal what foundations are made of. Ours weren't built on perfection. They were built on choice. On honesty. On a promise spoken in low light beside a sleeping child. We stay. Not because we have to. Not because we're afraid. But because this time, we're finally ready to fight for the same future. Together.